as you chart your course, I would say don't try to chart your course for the next 30 years, by the way. I think that is, you could chart your course for maybe the next 5 and say, what are the key important things that I want to do in the next 5 years from a career standpoint?
Mm.
But then just be super open to opportunities.
What drew you to the MBA, and what did the MBA mean to you, the investment in yourself and your career, now that you're on the other side and now that you're also back at Darden in this new capacity?
Well, I think for me, it came at a time in my life. I was in my mid 20s, and I had a degree in animal behavior in undergrad. So I did not have a lot of business, but I found myself in a sales job coming out of college, which was great, which I really enjoyed. But I really wanted to do marketing. And so I actually, very luckily, I had a great boss who was one of my first mentors. And I had really not thought about going back to business school. And he said, this is a way to really think about making a pivot in your career. You could stay here and do that over, many years, or you could go back to business school and be able to make that pivot. And that's one of the things that I think is so important that business school allows you to do. For me, it was getting the foundational pieces of business education, and it was making that pivot into marketing, which is what I really, really wanted to do, or thought I wanted to do, and gave me a chance to figure that out. So it was a great move. And I see so much of that pivot piece still happening today with my students. That's a really big part of why people think about business school.
Absolutely. And it can be such an unlock, right? It's great to see sort of now on the other side of that, seeing students kind of follow and helping them pursue. And so, as you mentioned, you went from business school to the private sector, and then you found your way into nonprofit and the INGO space. And you spent over 20 years at Save the Children. And by the way, you were their first female CEO, I should add. Did you always have this sort of path in mind? And what's driven you as a leader, or perhaps serves as your leadership philosophy?
I have to say, I had never had pretty much any of the pivots that I made in my career in mind. And I think that's something to keep, at the back of our minds as you think about kind of your future and your career. I think for me, it was doing things that I was really, 3 things I think about. One is, can I learn something in the next thing that I'm going to do? 2 is, can I add value? And 3 is there something in there that I'm passionate about? And I would say from my first pivot from the business world, when I was living in Hong Kong, actually, and went from American Express to a startup coffee company that I did with a classmate from Darden, actually. And that was all about, this is something I know I will learn a ton about. I know I will learn a lot in this particular next piece of my career. And it was never about, will I make more money or will I climb the ladder in terms of the decisions that I made. It was always about, is this something that I think I can add some value? I have something that I can add value to. I know I'm going to learn something, and there's a piece of this that I'm really passionate about. And small business I was passionate about. And so that led to that piece. The real big pivot that happened in Hong Kong was my understanding of the impacts of poverty on children. So we traveled an awful lot with our kids while we were there. And just those differences that my kids had versus the kids that I met was just a really big wake-up call. And I thought there's got to be something I could do. I've got some skills. There must be something that I could do. And so when we came back from Hong Kong, I really wanted to go into the nonprofit space, and I really wanted to do it with a company, an organization that focused on children. And then it was another Darden connection that got me into that role at Save the Children, that first role. And I thought I'd only stay for a couple of years. And after 22 years, I did finally retire from Save the Children, but it was a fantastic pivot. So.
Wow, what a ride. Yeah, of course. And just kind of being open to that, right? The network and the magic that kind of happens. Going in with a goal,
Yeah.
and, being open to being inspired to do something new. That's great.
And
Okay.
that's literally how I got to Darden. It was
Yeah.
another opportunity to make a pivot. So, but I never in a million years could I have like laid all this out and said, "Yep, that's what I'm going to do," and
Yeah.
there's how to do it. And I always say to students, you have to keep yourself totally open to these opportunities because that's where the magic happens, as you said.